today, the NHL draft lottery tonight. And if you don't know, that is a big deal here in Buffalo. To some, anyway. To the Sabres on an annual basis. Joining me now is Spencer German, 92.3 The Fan in Cleveland. Spencer, have we spoken before? 92.3 The Fan in Cleveland, sorry. Have we spoken before?
I think so, yeah. I think you guys had me on earlier this year talking about Myles Garrett potentially.
Yeah, I think maybe that was my co-host. I have just sort of followed you because of your Rochester roots, and I was there. You and I have that in common, sort of learning this in college in Rochester. You're RIT, and I'm Fisher.
Yeah, so I actually went to school out here in Cleveland, but I worked at RIT for a couple of years, and that's why I'm sure that's probably why you picked up on the pass there. But yeah, I knew that about you going to Fisher, and obviously there's some great schools up there that obviously there's a lot of connections and rivals, and it's always in good fun.
Yes, right. You were not a student at RIT, but then went back there. I read on your bio, I worked in had some different radio and radio related gigs in Rochester. Very cool. Well. That's mostly a coincidence here today, Spencer. The Browns are so interesting right now. You know, I made the crack about the Sabres as you were waiting to come on. Maybe there's a comparison here, just kind of waiting for the day to arrive as it has for the Bills, where, the sun comes out. And the Browns, I would, acknowledge in the last decade have had, a few moments. But what is it like right now with them? You're maybe a little close to being post-Deshaun Watson. The draft certainly was interesting. The Hunter trade, there's a lot. How do you feel the fans overall feel about what the Browns are right now?
I think fans have kind of accepted that this team is in a rebuilding phase. I actually think that Jimmy Haslam, the team owner's statements at the owners' meetings back in March, where he flat out said that the Deshaun Watson trade was a swing and a miss and that they have a hole to dig themselves out of. I think that was actually a really big step for the organization and the fan base kind of mending fences, if you will, because it has been sort of this tenuous relationship the last couple of years with a lot of fans who weren't happy that they brought in Deshaun. And then on top of it, Deshaun wasn't playing very well, so that just compounded things. And so for them to kind of come out and admit, we messed up on this, I think that sort of got people in the right headspace to start moving forward and moving on and looking ahead to the future. So as much as, Brown fans, by the time the season rolls around, they'll always talk themselves into the team being something special. That's just how – you guys know how that works in Buffalo too. These are two passionate fan bases that love their teams, and they always are going to, see the positive spin on it. But I think everybody kind of understands that this team's in a little bit of a rebuild right now. They will likely get out from the Deshaun contract next year by making him a June 1st designation cut and split the money over two seasons, and that'll kind of close the door on that era. And it looks like they kind of set themselves up now to potentially draft their real franchise quarterback next year. But in the meantime, they have kind of this fun, quirky quarterback room with a bunch of different faces and names and style of players, and we'll see how that all kind of shakes out when they have this open competition. So I think it's kind of a realization that the team's, a work in progress, but they're going to try to enjoy the ride while they can.
Yes. It's funny how it works with fans because, again, this reminds me of the Sabres. There are times when you really want the team to just sort of be real and even tank, take a step back. The comment you made about Haslam, what he said about Watson, we love to hear an owner or an executive admit a mistake. So there's that. And, we might want them to be worse next year for the benefits, whereas a team has the challenge of the players, and that can be tough. I don't know exactly how that would work internally. There are a lot of guys on a football team, but the Browns owe their players some level of commitment, to winning games this year. But everybody kind of knows that it's more in their best interest to not, probably.
Yeah, and that's the thing that obviously, Kevin Stefanski, the coaching staff, they have to kind of balance those things. They can't truly tank, and that's why I think when you use the word tank, players take offense to that because they're putting their bodies on the line every single week. They're not going out there and trying to lose on purpose. I think the Browns are kind of in an interesting situation, though, especially after the draft where they traded back with the Jaguars and got that second first-round pick. First of all, I don't think they're going to be a great team anyway this year. Now, I think, their ceiling might be somewhere around 9 wins if they have a really good year, and maybe they're flirting with the playoffs. But I think the Vegas total is still around like 5.5 for them or 4.5, somewhere in that range. So I'm anticipating they're still not going to be a great team. Now, you can make an argument that if they just had competent offense last year, they probably do win more than the 3 games that they won, and that's fair. So with competent offense, like I think they can sort of be like a middling team. But they because they have that second-round pick, or that first-round pick rather, like that's okay because they'll be they'll have an opportunity, or they'll be in a place where even if they finish with like 7 wins, 8 wins, and they're out of the top 10 in terms of picking, they have a second first rounder that they can pair to try to get up and maybe get that quarterback anyway. So I think because of how Andrew Berry handled the draft and him making that move, they sort of did thread the needle on, hey, let's try to be competitive, even though we might not be. And, if we stink and we have, a top 10 pick and maybe the Jaguars stink and we have another top 10 pick or a top 12 or 15 pick on top of the one that we have, then, maybe we come away with 2 great players or we package them together and get a quarterback. So I think they're kind of in a unique situation in that way.
Yes. Spencer German, 92.3 The Fan in Cleveland, my guest. That's always a fun thing. This is another one we know about through the years with hockey or the Bills, where you have another team's first and you can just root against them and hope that, like the Bears with Carolina, Spencer, the Bears I think might have picked 9th last year, but having that not free, but number 1 overall turned out well for them after that Bryce Young trade. So you used the word quirky earlier to describe the quarterback room. I like it. First of all, how do you think, or maybe you think how they want to play it? Open competition, you also said. What does that look like when it's 4 guys?
Yeah, so I think Flacco and Kenny Pickett go in sort of as the leaders in the clubhouse, obviously, being the veterans of the group, and it's going to be up to Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders to sort of compete to earn that job. What I think it truly is, from all accounts, going to be, though, a go out, play, let's see what the off-season program brings, let's see what training camp brings, let's see what preseason brings, and then they'll make their decisions on, who's the starter and kind of go from there. What's interesting with them drafting 2 quarterbacks, though, is now they're in this really interesting situation because they always carry 4 quarterbacks in the offseason, but we know they're not going to do that during the regular season. So somebody's the odd man out. Is it Flacco, who's the elder statesman of the group, and maybe you go young and you try to let Kenny Pickett start and then at some point turn it over to one of the rookies or both of the rookies? Is it, hey, you drafted Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round, maybe he increases his value from what it was during draft weekend clearly, and you can flip him for a pick or something at the end of the end of training camp? Andrew Berry, the last 2 years, 2023, he actually traded Josh Dobbs to the Cardinals and got a 5th-round pick out of it right at the end of training camp. He tried to do the same thing last year. He floated both Jameis Winston and Tyler Huntley, who were on the roster, and nobody really took the bait, so they ended up just cutting Huntley and keeping Jameis Winston. But he has this tendency to sort of shop one of those guys at the end of training camp. So I think that's kind of the fun question in this is who is the player that they likely try to shop at the end of training camp to cut that room down to 3. And I don't think it's going to be Dylan Gabriel because they used a 3rd-round pick on him. They probably want to be right about that pick unless Shedeur Sanders really dazzles and maybe is the one rookie they keep. To me, it sort of comes down to, is it going to be Flacco or is it going to be Kenny Pickett who earns the starting job and then they maybe try to trade the other one?
Right, or he's released, yeah. I was thinking the same thing when you laid that out about Gabriel. The fact that you picked him on day 2, that's a really bad look. If you release him, like you just basically wasted the pick to keep your 5th-round quarterback over him. And how do you cut Sanders? I mean, you can't do that. Like you mentioned, a trade maybe. Wow. I mean, it's really interesting and maybe unique what the Browns have done. What do you know, Spencer, about their process at the draft with the quarterbacks in mind? The common throwaway line that I tend to hear is that the owner made the Sanders pick. But I don't know if that's fair. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the initial reaction when they traded up to get him, I think everybody in the media room sort of felt that was probably what transpired. Like, oh, this is a Jimmy Haslam pick. But as the dust has settled on it, I don't feel as inclined to think that. I'll put it to you this way: he might have felt strongly about Shedeur Sanders. He might have liked Shedeur Sanders and felt going into day 3, like they always talk about doing things collaboratively, like everyone has an opinion. They all sort of get to put their heads together on these big decisions. They've continually said that about the Deshaun Watson conversation and why they traded for him and all that. It was a group effort. So I'm imagining they all were having conversations, and maybe Jimmy did like Shedeur Sanders and especially liked him when he was available on day 3 in the 5th round. So I'm not saying, like, I do think it's probably possible that he could have at least spoken up and said, well, hey, he's there. Why don't we try to get him here in the 5th round? Like, it makes sense. We don't really have a quarterback right now anyway. Like, the more the merrier. And so maybe that was part of the conversation. But I don't know that he, like, pounded the table to go up and for sure make them get him, like, force their hand to go trade for him. And it does make sense. Like, Shedeur, even though he fell to the 5th round, the consensus, even after the draft, has been that he was graded by most teams as a day 2 guy, so 2nd or 3rd round. And then it was really just these meetings that tanked his stock and sort of scared people away from actually trying to draft him. And so understanding that, like, the value was 100% there. So it was only going to take one team to decide, hey, this is the spot. Like, and I can't blame the Browns either in that respect, because now I can blame them for taking Dylan Gabriel where they did. That was, I think, the most perplexing thing they did on draft weekend. Mm-hmm. But to end up with Shedeur Sanders as a 5th-round pick, like, nobody's really knocked them for that. So even if the owner did have some say in it, I don't think it's the end of the world, because as Andrew Berry said, they felt at that point he has a good chance of outperforming his draft spot. And, you know, if he somehow dazzles and wins the job or becomes the immediate backup, like, I think that's 100% true.
Interesting. I would look at it, too, and I don't know hardly anything about their dynamic, Spencer, but for the owner to even suggest the Sanders pick, however it's right to put it, to me, that's a sign of respect towards Stefanski. I mean, we talk about the Giants a lot, of course, and like, oh, well, they have to win this year, so otherwise coach is fired, GM is fired, how do you do it? Very different than this. I mean, two-time coach of the year. Would Haslam be just somebody who would do that if that's what happened regardless, or does he think, I've got a coach here who's comfortable in his own skin, has proven he knows what he's doing, and this is a unique challenge, but I think he's up to it?
Yeah, so it's interesting because Haslam was he meddled a lot in his early days as an owner. Like I that was well known around the NFL in general, and I think he's had a hard time shaking that reputation. Like, there's a lot of people that feel he still is, you know, has his nose in things. And I'll say this, like, the Deshaun decision, as bad as it was, and as bad as it's turned out to be, I've never blamed, you know, Jimmy Haslam, the franchise, for like, what they were trying to do made sense. The thinking behind it made sense. They felt like they needed to upgrade the position. Baker had sort of realized and maxed out his full potential. There was also some behind-the-scenes stuff that I don't know how familiar it is in other markets, but here in Cleveland it's well reported that he didn't necessarily, like, get along with everybody in the locker room. I think him and Myles Garrett butted heads a lot. So there was some tension on that front of, like, why they wanted to move on from Baker Mayfield. And so, yeah, like, if you're going to move on from a quarterback that, you know, is at least, like, middle of the road, like, an average quarterback in this league, like, you'd put him probably, you know, in the middle tier range of guys, like, you want to get a guy who is, you know, top 10, top 5. And so they swung big. Deshaun obviously had the tape at the time of being this great quarterback. I think the things they didn't necessarily account for was, like, the mental side of it, like how his time away was going to impact him, how all the hatred that he's obviously felt wherever he goes was going to impact him. And that's, I think, been a big reason why he struggled here. But when push came to shove, like, I don't blame them for that. And so, like, for trying to upgrade the quarterback position, because that's what every team's trying to do. So the thought process there was sound. And I don't, like, I understand where, yes, there's been moments where Jimmy Haslam's maybe meddled a little bit more and done some things, and I'm sure he still has a seat at the table. He's the owner of the team. I'm sure he absolutely does. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure he still at times maybe interjects, maybe even at times where he shouldn't. But I do think there is a healthy respect for this regime, and he tries to make that very clear. And, you know, he tries to generally trust them with the football side of things because that's not his job. And so, yeah, I think that it's a tough thing for him to shake. But I do think he's taken steps towards, since early on in his tenure as the owner of the team, you know, shaking that a little bit and trying to get away from trying to be quite as hands-on and actually trusting the people that he hired.
Spencer, how about the running back gambit? I mean, it's all about the quarterbacks, but they also drafted 2 running backs. I'm an avid fantasy player, and when they drafted Judkins early in the second, ahead of Travion Henderson, I'm like, okay, this is a pretty good landing spot for an early day 2 rookie. You know, we might see Judkins get a ton of touches as a starter for this team. Then they also draft Dylan Sampson, who had his fans as a prospect, and, like, I don't know. What do you think they want to do there?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that stood out about those two picks, and then also they restructured Jerome Ford, who's one of the running backs currently on the roster. They restructured his contract last week to sort of reduce his amount, and he took a pay cut essentially. I think all of that, first and foremost, sort of signaled that they're probably out of the Nick Chubb business. Like I don't think Nick Chubb is going to be returning to this team now. Which is disappointing for Browns fans because he's a guy that's basically been the face of the franchise the last, since he got here and has just taken the league by storm. So I think there's a little disappointment there. But I'm gonna be honest, I think the moves they made in the draft at running back and sort of overhauling the group and setting this new era, if you will, in the backfield. I think it was great by them. I was huge on Quinshon Judkins during this pre-draft process. The way he runs, that physical running style. I kind of compared him a lot to Kareem Hunt, who's another guy that Browns fans are very familiar with because he played here for several years, and he's actually from here. And so I was really excited about that pick for them. I think he's going to turn out to be really, really, top that sort of top of the line guy, that front line guy. And then Sampson, I think, adds like a different dynamic, a different sort of running style, and can sort of be. We saw this great 1-2 punch with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. I think they can sort of form their own sort of dynamic duo there. And there's a lot of reason to be excited. So especially going back to Kevin Stefanski's base offense, what he likes to do, the run game is so pivotal to that group having success. So I think there should be a lot of excitement around the revamped running back room they've built and these two rookies that are coming in and have a chance to kind of blaze this new path that obviously probably won't include Nick Chubb.
Well, I'm not a Browns fan, but I echo your sentiments on Chubb. He always seemed like a super popular, first of all, great player that didn't give you any reason, not to like him or anything like that. Then the injury challenges, and of course that gruesome injury in Pittsburgh, the league kind of spoke on him, right? You get into free agency, and then if you get past the draft and the guy isn't signed yet, well, for as awesome as a runner as he was, I guess the league is saying we don't think so. But probably somebody takes a look at him. You would think, right?
Yeah, there's been some rumors that the Bears have shown some interest. So, somebody's going to sign him at some point, and at this point, the market, like you laid out, has kind of dictated that he's probably not going to get paid a massive amount of money. The fact that he's had 2 seasons ended by season-ending injuries the last 2 years, which has been unfortunate. So the market's going to sort of dictate that. I can tell you, man, Buffalo and Cleveland, I used this comparison earlier. The fan bases, I think, are very similar and how they're passionate about football and what they want in their football players. Nick Chubb, if he had ended up in Buffalo, it would have been the exact same effect. He's very much a work pail, show up and work guy, doesn't do a lot of talking, and the way he ran, people fell in love with his style of play. So yeah, he was transcendent here, and it is a tough door I think for fans to see closed. But he'll land somewhere, and I'm sure it'll be hard for fans to see him in a different uniform. But that's life in the NFL. Every player has a shelf life, especially at that position. And the Browns, like I said, have sort of signaled that they're sort of moving on here, and it'll be an unfortunate ending because nobody wanted to see it end that way with the injuries. But sometimes that's just how it goes in the NFL.
Right, Spencer. One more for you, please, if you don't
Sure.
mind. Elijah Moore. Speaking of players who last through the draft in free agency, I guess, although there was some weird thing where the Browns kind of had his rights, the Bills signed him away from Cleveland. What are the Bills getting? He was a prospect that I really liked. I wanted the Bills to draft him 4 years ago. They didn't. And since, he really hasn't had much of a career. The easy thing on a guy like this, especially if he had the pedigree coming into the league, is, well, he hasn't had a good quarterback yet. And, people make that excuse, and maybe it's right. I'm asking you what you think the Bills are getting in Elijah Moore.
I actually think what you just said there is 100% fair. It's no secret that when Elijah Moore had steady quarterback play, and if you look back to his best games in 2023 came when Joe Flacco was starting for that 5-game stretch at the end of the season that helped get the Browns to the playoffs that year. He had his best games then, and some of that was the familiarity with Flacco because they had played together in New York. But that was a good stretch for him. And then last year, his best games came when Jameis Winston took over the offense and was a guy that kind of sees the field better and can go through his progressions and do those things. And it was obvious, Deshaun really struggled at times with Elijah. There was that first year they were together after they traded for him in 2023. He he'd be open all the time, it felt like, and Deshaun would just never be able to see him or find him, and it was the most bizarre thing ever because you go back and watch the film and be like, he's wide open. Why wasn't he throwing the ball here? Why wasn't he looking here? So with that in mind, like I do think Elijah has a chance to really thrive with you guys in Buffalo, with obviously the talent that is Josh Allen as his quarterback. I don't know, like I think at his best he could probably be like a number 2 guy. I think he's more so probably a number 3 guy. But he's a number 3 guy that can come up big for you when you're getting the ball consistently. And Josh is somebody who's so good. Like, he will absolutely take advantage of what Elijah Moore does best and finding those open spots and zones and things like that to sort of create opportunities and make plays. So, yeah, I think you guys got a pretty good one there. I was surprised the Browns didn't make more of an effort to retain him. I know they put that tender, that unrestricted free agent tender, which is very rare, so that he counts towards their compensatory pick formula. That was why they did that. But, I was surprised they didn't try to retain him because right now their receiver room is a little bland and doesn't have a lot to offer. So I was surprised they didn't do that. But I think he ends up in a good place for him in Buffalo where he has a chance to really thrive.
Interesting. A little bit more room there for Harold Fannin out of Bowling Green to make an impact as a rookie. Maybe we'll talk about him someday in the future. Spencer, you've given us a lot of your time today. Thanks. It's nice to connect with you.
Absolutely. Anytime. I always appreciate coming on closer to my hometown of Rochester. So happy to do it anytime you guys want me, and looking forward to future conversations, man. Thanks.
Likewise. Appreciate that. Spencer